big thank you, Matt, for joining us this morning for an episode of The Responsible Edge. It's absolutely fantastic to have you on board. I know you're a busy chap. You're lots on your plate at the moment, and I appreciate you finding the time. Again, thank you for joining us this morning.
Yeah, and thank you for having me in. And you say I'm busy, but it's being discerning enough to know where the right place to put your energy and time. And I think what you're doing with the Anti-Greenwash Charter and the times we're in and the way business is traveling is an ideal place to be. So I'm looking to learn with you in the next, I guess, hour. So.
Indeed, Matt, you are an absolutely fantastic guest off the bat for plugging us right at the beginning. You're definitely going to be invited back on. But Matt, we've got 20 minutes or so to talk about you, which knowing you as I do is not going to allow us to really scratch the surface. But let's try. Starting wherever you would like, provide our listeners with an understanding of you and your background, and in particular, perhaps the sort of formative experiences is a good place to start that have shaped your worldview and have driven you to do what you've done so far in your career and have inspired you to think about what you want to do with the rest of it.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. I can give that a stab. You may have to reframe bits and bring you back on the path. I'm going to start very openly that I have no training in what I do. I just have my heart and my values. And it took a long time, well, maybe not such a long time, to kind of realize where I was best suited to do the work I do, which the work I'd say is in service of the planet, in service of life. I'm Cornish, really proud Cornishman, but more the spirit of Cornwall rather than the culture of Cornwall. Wonderful place, but it has its diversities and its issues, from being vastly impoverished to vastly beautiful, and some big wealthy places as well. So I come from a place called the Clays, Penwithwick, kind of like a lunar landscape. I was brought up in nature. I lived with my dad in 1977 onwards, when my parents split up, so quite unusual at that time. My mum didn't live far away, and my dad just let me play in the fields when I wasn't at school and just be out there and just really be immersed in nature. And 8-year-old Matt wanted to really love space. The Star Wars was around then and stuff, and it was just off the back of Apollo missions and stuff in space and sci-fi. And I love nature, coming home covered in ticks and, with butterflies and things. My parents probably didn't like me coming home covered in ticks, and ticks still give me a bit of like, oof. So that was like an early thing, just immersed in nature, and like parents that kind of really just let me be, and move it forward. I was good at art, at all these things. And by the time I finished first year of GCSEs and stuff, being introduced into the UK curriculum, I was kind of tired out from, I love geography and stuff like that. Don't love math, don't love science. But I knew I wanted to carry on in education. So I went straight into art college, but chose completely the wrong course. They told me I'd be allowed to move to another course after 2 weeks. That wasn't true. And so I was doing technical illustration, like drawing car engines and things like that, like mind-numbingly dull, but met some of the greatest friends of my life. Carried on through like college doing art. It didn't work. I wasn't getting on well with the head teacher. I didn't agree with the teaching methods that were like, let's draw in their style, but not my style. Very much pen and ink, Arthur Rackham. I was also a graffiti artist. So I kind of, lots of different things happening. So I ended up dropping out of art college, a term before the end, which might sound crazy, but my parents are so supportive and I wouldn't have got anywhere, and the course wasn't fit for purpose. But it gave me something where I think I wanted to prove myself. So knowing that time's short and I need to wrap this fast. So what happened after that is I paid off all my student debts. I worked on a bar for the summer, did a little bit of travel, came back, and a design job came up in Torquay. And I got the train to Torquay. I got an interview, and I was going to be an hour late on the train. I contacted the people, and I just sort of said, "I'm really sorry, I'm going to be late." "That's all right. We've got a candidate for you." I sat for an hour while the other candidate was in with these creators, looking around the studio, going, "God, I don't know what typography is. I don't know what this is. I don't know what that is." So I walked into the interview and go, I'm really sorry. I've completely wasted your time. So what you probably start seeing is I'm radically open and honest about things when I can't do things. And I'm so sorry. I'm wasting your time. Oh, well, you're here. Show us your portfolio. And I got the job. And they told me to move to Torquay 7 days later. Now, these two guys had just come off the back of being some of the top directors at Saatchi's and had moved out with an idea to relocate from the city, and I found it was West End work, West Country prices was their line. And so that was my first immersion into design, and they cut my cloth with me on how to take my illustrative style into this sort of creative, minimal sort of aspect and learn about fonts and spend like hours just working on spacing for a billboard and stuff like that. And then play this forward 8 years. I'd worked all over by this point. I'd done freelance for Sky and Lego. I had 4 redundancies. It turns out agencies get really excited, think they've got lots of money, then they unsustainably kind of go under or get rid of everyone. But I became very resilient and maybe a little bit cocky with this. Also, by 29, I was completely disillusioned. It was too easy to make money through design. I had no big aims to go to the city because I love the sea. I love nature. It's that Cornish lad in me. My college and uni was by the sea in Swansea. I was living in Torquay for this job. And I was like, wow, is that it? I've already not interested in my own career. I went traveling. I ended up getting off the beaten path in China and Tibet. It wasn't a big kind of immersive, oh my God, I found myself and the ways of Buddha or anything. It was just kind of like, actually, this is life. This is a way. This is diversity. I came back, and as the universe and serendipity would have, my dad called and said, oh, there's a job for a designer going at Eden Project. Do you, why don't you give it a go? It's like in your backyard where that 8-year-old me used to go into the clayworks. It was in the old claywork.
Oh, I love that. And
so I turned up all corporate. It turned out to be in a porter cabin because Eden was in the early days, all in porter cabins. They called it Porter Cabin City. I met David Attenborough later on in one of those porter cabins, and Ray Mears and many others. And I went in and they looked at me and they were like, oh, what's a corporate like you doing here? They literally, it wasn't maybe the pleasantest interview, but I was very resilient. And I said, well, it just came out from my heart. I didn't think about this, but it was basically any designer worth their salt will be able to be the designer you need as the client. And imagine my corporate world meeting your environment world. What might we create together? Then they thanked me. They looked at me with a little bit of disdain, or that's how I felt. I walked about 20 paces off. I looked down on Eden then from the car park, and then I got a call just saying, same as the Saatchi one, the job's yours. I was like, oh, great. What's the salary? 50% pay cut. They wouldn't even give me the top band. I just bought a house with a friend in Torquay, which I was renovating. But I was looking down going, oh my God, 8-year-old Matt, space, the diomes, nature, the other side of me, playing in nature. But I didn't say at the start, I wanted to be David Attenborough, zoologist. I was neither academic or driven enough to get those, but look what's been delivered to me. I took the job on, I took the 50% pay cut, and oh my, did I find what I call my making a living, making a difference. And that's really, in a nutshell, my journey. 8-year-old dreams came back to be the thing I ended up doing, working on nature and space from Cornwall, where I was born.
Isn't it amazing, Matt? And by the way, that was so brilliantly and humorously introduced. I think that's one of my favorite introductions and nutshells we've had from a guest. What would your, you yourself highlighted that there was a slightly rebellious, 17, 18-year-old graffiti artist, not really getting along with academia, obviously interested and excited to go out there and make some money in the world, and what that then led to over the course of the next sort of 10 years or so before coming back from your travels and joining the Eden Project. The work itself, though, over those 10 years wasn't aligned with your core values, which was what was so attractive about the Eden Project opportunity. That's a long period of time, though, is it not? Working in a space that you don't feel that alignment with. Like, what would your advice be to other sort of 17, 18-year-olds who are looking at the end of their college, looking at the end of their education, and thinking, okay, I don't really know what I want to do, or what I'm really drawn to. Like, what should they do? What's your advice to them in that situation?
Great question. And what would that advice be? Now, the thing for me is, at that age, you just get caught up in the excitement of jobs and friendships and places. And yet, when I first got those jobs, they were great, working for TV channels, getting commissioned by Sky to do something with related to Beaujolais, getting asked by Lego to do, hey, what would you create as an exhibition display? And I came up with a scratch and sniff laser salt course exhibition. And they were like, yeah, that sounds good. I used Lego, but that's what they gave. It was crazy and it was fun. And actually, it's what probably a lot of us as creators go, oh, this is amazing. But there's something like a deep knowing, and that deep knowing can take a long time for all of us. I've got friends in their 40s and 50s that go, oh, you really got it sorted. You know where things are. I said, it took really to 33 to get to a place, and that's when Leap was founded, my agency, my Design for Change planet-centered agency, off the back of Eden. But going back to career-wise, sometimes I think we've all got to take those experiences, and it doesn't mean we are stuck in those. It's knowing when is the right time to leave is the thing. You don't have to stay, all right, I had no choice. I got 4 redundancies. They're getting really good at redundancies and coaching, actually, the person making me redundant in the end. Are you all right? And I also had that cockiness that I could get a job, and it was a very different time as well. There's a lot more different ways now of getting jobs, but there's also a lot more trying for those jobs. So don't ever, if you've got those beliefs and those values, look at everything as experiential, and you're filling your bag of opportunities. And sometimes it's just get the work and understand what it is to be in these industries. I think it's really good to compare, like, this is like good work and this is bad work. We're going to talk, maybe bring Havas into the conversation later. Is Havas a good or bad organization? Well, it's deemed to have these bad clients, but are the people running the business and the employees bad people? Probably not. They are just people like you and I that had a job and then they got caught in the system and maybe even didn't know that they could change the system or walk away from the system and do the thing they want to do. So I think it's all around having experiences. And it was only through those 1993, I started with those ex-Saatchi directors. 1999 is when I kind of started to get my change point kind of thing. And Eden wasn't perfect either. I didn't land at Eden. They're like, you're now a green designer. It was like, we don't have any time, Matt. You just do what you do. And I was like, well, Eden's my client. It's got to be environmental. My life experience to then made me able to talk to printers and go, we're only going to do stuff on recycled paper. We're only going to produce things on this material. And I've been told by suppliers, you can't do this, you can't do that. And I was like, well, actually, I know you can because I've done it in my non-environmental career. And I now know how to do it environmentally. So let's learn together, and actually converting whole printers into that. So I don't know if I'm giving an exact answer, but I'm saying experiment with your career. Don't feel that you are stuck with it. Learn from what's around you, just like any ecosystem or pond. You go, that works for me, that doesn't. And you don't have to stay. And it's not that it's a good or bad thing, but be in a place where you're a journey person until you start finding the place that wants to be your home for a while.
And Matt, I think you've described that beautifully. I think we've had this theme come up recently. We've been very fortunate on the Responsible Edge to interview some really, really successful senior people. And I think one of the things that really strikes me when we talk about, the experiences akin to what you've just described is that it's very easy to look back and think everything was nicely laid out and everything was very clear and intentional from the beginning. But it's amazing how many people just say, no, at the time I was making the best decision I possibly could with the information that I had. And I was just learning forward and ultimately looking for experiences, as you say, that enriched me and ultimately felt right to me as I move forward in my career. So it's great to hear. I think it's a great message for other young people out there that don't have to be sat there fixated on, well, I don't have the whole thing figured out. It really isn't the normal path.
And yet again, you'll just take these things and go, that worked, that doesn't. I mean, Eden was a 50% pay cut. That was really hard for me. I moved back in with my parents at like 30.
That's commitment.
And I was coming back to Torquay and being not so environmental after work each day at 5 and driving up to renovate this house. And after a year and a half, I sold that on to my friend. Because it just wasn't working. It wasn't sustainable. I was loving the life at Eden. So the people, such a rich, fertile ground of people. But Eden was beautifully chaotic, and And I got to, again, cut my cloth in a new way. And people use that purpose. I don't like the word purpose, but just find a passion that was in me that was able to come out of me because they gave me the freedom to do so. And I think that's the biggest thing is that freedom for us when it comes. And what is our expression of freedom? And one last thing, I know you want to grab me there, but also to challenge the brief of you, because the story we tell ourselves, because we're growing up in the expectations of our parents and societal output and saturation, it doesn't have to be our story. Right. And so it takes a time for all of us. I wouldn't say 25-year-old or 28-year-old Matt was able to challenge the briefing so much. I was just sussing out what means the most to me. One thing was always key in me, that I didn't want to be far from the sea. So that was a prerequisite. And when people said, oh, you could earn so much more money in London, I said, yeah, there's no sea there. And that, like, staying to knowing that I would maybe take not so much money or not so great projects or stuff, but that actually turned out not to be true after that, to be by the sea. So sorry, you were going to ask something.
No, I was going to, that was brilliant. I mean, again, you can see throughout the timeline of events that you've shared with us so far that certainly money has not played the fundamental factor in you deciding what you're doing. And the joy, I think, for anybody listening in is by following those passions and following those values that you have as they've grown and developed and presented themselves over the course of your development yourself, that actually that lends itself to being more commercially successful. And I think that's a great lesson for anybody out there to learn. But Matt, let me again, I knew we could talk for hours, you and I, but I want to give people the full picture. So you're at Eden, you're having this experience. It was really interesting to hear you talk about the freedom that you had within the role, and then think back to the experience that you had gone through during your college course, where essentially that was the lack of freedom, the lack of expression, if you like, was the thing that really just sort of disheartened you or disillusioned you, if you like, from that course. And it's fascinating to know that Eden then became the point at which you felt really emboldened and encouraged to sort of to run with things, if you like, in the Matt Hocking way. Talk to me now about what happens at the point. So Eden then evolves into Leap, and just talk us through, had you always had the goal and intention to set up your own agency, or no, you hadn't? Okay, just talk us through that bit of the...
I had intention to be a responsible, lazy slacker surfer, and to be truthful, you know, that was what I was looking for. But then there's this interesting moral compass, self-accountability, duty within me, which started to rise. And actually, you could say it's been a beautiful bane as I've got older. So something in me, that responsibility started to show up. Now, Eden actually didn't put anything. They didn't say, Matt, you need to design in this way because we're this. That was me going, this is how we should design, because Eden is a part of, you know, to coin somebody else's business name, Client Earth sort of thing. And that's when my sort of planet-centered design process and belief, and go, well, actually, you know, this is the client, and all life is the client. And in that, I guess I had the power of Eden. So suddenly, although I'd had these jobs before, I had a new level of power because Eden was such an anomaly, and it was just launched. You know, this was literally, I was there year one. And so many magical things were happening. And I said, got to meet David Attenborough. I got to sit in a closed room and discuss stuff around on a Tibetan voice workshop. And the lady from Tibet, because she had been exiled since, I think, 1948, I was the first person she'd come across that had recently been to Tibet. So all these anomaly things happened. And I was just like, this is amazing. So forget the fact that I'm 50% not so much money, and I'm back with my dad living at home, and I can't invite friends around and stuff. It was just this amazing thing. But at the same time, I was watching, Eden had various incumbent agencies. So really the role for me was a much lesser role than I'd had in my more senior roles and freelance career. But again, going back to, is any designer worth their salt? What might we do together, with salt being like the original coin of earth kind of thing. And that's when it started to come. And we've suddenly, because we were on site, all these projects, external and internal, like every section of Eden started to want to work with you, from car parks to operations to senior management to partners. And it was this lovely time. And then I was like going, oh, actually, what would an agency look like that was at Eden? And it was another aspect of Eden. I think Eden had quite a big debt then, so I chose the debt level of Eden and said, well, we could make this much money. And by this time, the graphics, well, it's not all it. We were designer makers, so there was about 16 of us in one team. So we grew very quickly, and there were amazing people, Heidi and Lou and John and Ben, and we were, we'd go surfing after work and things. But I watched all these agencies interact, and they'd be really green for Eden. I'd go, that's amazing. Oh, I love that. I look at then their website and go, why are they not green for, well, they've got loads of clients. Why don't you just tell them all about that? Why are we just being green for the planet company and for the hospitality company or the built environment company? And that made me think about this aspect, like what would a better business do? I also met my partner at the time, mother of my kids, there, and she was working for the Soil Association, and I didn't know I was going to become a dad. 6 months after we set up, I set up Leap, but did. And so she wanted to move to Wiltshire. This is my only time for 2 years I was away from the sea. Came back in the end. Was the end of our relationship. And that's when I set Leap up. It was like, well, what am I going to do after Eden? And I would never have left if I hadn't fallen in love. And Claire was going off to do sustainable and organic programming for some people like, the Orient Express and stuff like that, based out of Wiltshire. And so Leap came, and I actually thought, again, I'd be a bit of a surf slacker and she would be the high earner. And I would kind of just create a little bit and surf a little bit, but none of that happened. But I launched Leap as just Leap Sustainable Media then. So the bat signal, the call sign was Sustainable Media, which kind of is a bit of a quagmire and it's a long name. But my value, my heart space was again telling me very quickly that, so the idea with Leap was planet-centered design where all graphic design had the environment in mind, basically. And so I knew how to do stuff on the right paper. I knew how to minimize. I knew how to do signage on the right materials. I knew how to do websites that were low carbon and making sure all our energies was on renewable energy. So signed up with good energy. So I did all these actions just from a heart space, not even thinking about money. And then people heard about us. And then suddenly it was like, hey, I showed you the weird kid sign behind me. And it was like, I was the weird kid in design doing this planet stuff. And I had design agencies going, oh, can you tell me about that? Just opening their doors because they didn't see any competitive success in it. I had others phoning me up going, that's a brilliant USP, that planet thing of yours. And I was like, I didn't know what a unique selling point was then, by the way. I looked at it and I was like, oh, it's not a unique selling point. How can life be a unique selling point? Is what support us in doing the work we do. And then bizarrely, when I signed up to Good Energy, they sent me, I think we were the 36,000th customer at the time or something. They said, oh, we didn't know the design agencies that have our values. Would you come over? And we've got a brand tender in a week's time. I know it's last minute, but would you show up? And we showed up, and there was all these suited and booted people. And then there was me and my combats and my 7-month pregnant partner. And we walked away with their contract. And then suddenly we were in the papers as well, this new eco family and stuff. We were in the Sunday Mail, and it kind of I always say it's like a bat signal because I like superheroes. And if you didn't know what the bat signal was in a superhero, you wouldn't know what you were looking at. You look up, you see a bat, and it was the same for Leap with sustainable media. People just found us, and once they were talking about us, the work just flew in, and lots of suppliers and clients going, we've been waiting for a business like you. And there were other businesses at the time. Futera was out there in its early days with Ed and Solly. There's Sophie Thomas Matthews. They've all become friends over the years because there was only a few of us. They're massive and bigger and better and global than us. I was the more maverick, Cornish, surf-loving, planet-loving creative.
And Matt, that was, again, thank you. That was brilliantly introduced. And for anyone that's listening in that wants to kind of read the story of Leap, we'll obviously provide, all links and sort of calls to action to allow people to go and check things out. I want to now, Matt, we've brilliantly gone through 25 minutes already, so we are.
Sorry, I talk too much. Yeah.
No, you talk brilliantly, and I'm just going to try not to get in your way. Can you just touch upon when B Corp kind of came into your awareness and just your role within B Corp? We're obviously going to go on to talk about the article in a moment, but just about your experience and involvement?
I'll keep this light. So B Corp was, again, I guess I'm a quester. I'm a purveyor of finding, of curiosity. And just like, again, your own greenwash charter, it's like, how can we hold ourselves accountable when there is very little accountability, especially in those early days? And what keeps us on the path while allowing us to still explore the path with abundance and curiosity? So, and also a lot of people would go, what makes you a sustainable designer? There was a lot, I would do talks, and I was doing loads and loads of talks as this, again, weird kid. I was talking on Paper and the Planet, Paper and Digital, universities asking me. So I was all over the place very quickly. And people would come up after events and go, I don't believe you. I don't trust what you're saying. How can you only design this way? It's all bollocks. It's all for commercial gain. I'm glad people are honest with me because it doesn't affect me either way. I don't judge people, and they are allowed their own judgment, and it won't affect me. And actually, some of those people have come up later in life to apologize. And they said, you stayed your path, and I really honor you for that. But for me, it did make me think, all right, what's our proof points that makes us more? So the first things is one of our clients put us in 2005. So we formed in October 2004. We were 20 years of Leap Design for Change last October. We're now 10 years of being a certified B Corp on the 16th of January, just gone. We're the first design agency in Europe and the first B Corp in Cornwall. But where did all that come from? First one was a client putting us in, and I won Cornwall Sustainability Awards Employee of the Year of my own business. And I was the only one. And then and that was my first winning an award since I'd won my only other award that was on my CV was my Blue Peter badge, which I'm still really proud of.
Oh, quite rightly so.
And that's opened a lot of doors for me. So any young people, students listening, Blue Peter badges open more doors to me than anything else I've had. And then I started going, so, once you win an award, it kind of does open up other things, or you get in the media. And then 2 years later, 2006, or maybe a bit later than that, won Best SME and overall winner at the Cornwall Sustainability Awards. And then about 30 more awards after that in different things, all sustainability. So suddenly we had these awards. At the same time, what I noticed is some of our tools. So I'd already come up with like a carbon calculator for paper, working out any time that you ordered a brochure from us, I could tell you the carbon footprint of it. So awesome. I self-initiated that with a bit of science help and university help. So that helped us win awards. I already knew our impact. So, we had all these policies, even though I was just Matt Hocking. And then we also I thought, well, by the time I think it's about 2010, we went on to do ISO 14001. So a whole environmental management system, which you and probably quite a few people will know. For us as a small agency, independent agency, fairly irrelevant in the scheme of things. But it was again, could we do it? And we did. We held it for 5 years. We got investors and people. But they felt really linear, Charlie. Here's a planet. Here's the people. Nothing was joined up. At the same time, I was just hearing about these other things. So there was the ethical alliance there, and there was other things. But some of them felt like and fair trade, you could buy them in a way. No disrespect. This is just my opinion, and I don't know all of them. And so it's a sweeping assumption. But it felt like you could pay some money and you got that symbol. And I wanted something more rigorous and robust. By accident, I came across B Corp. I love the Story of Stuff video. If anybody hasn't seen it, how stuff works, just look at it. How does a $4 radio that's made by human hands in China, has rare minerals in it and plastics and all sorts of good and bad things, travel across the world to be $4 in a Walmart or £4 in an Asda? How is that possible? It's not. It's at the detriment of planet and people. And I just love the compelling way this film showed, this animation with an American comedian. Typical designer, looked at the bottom. Oh, business agency called Free Range. American agency, liked them. Oh, what's this B Corp thing? For some reason, that B Corp symbol, that bat symbol, going back to that again, that hooked me. I looked at it, it's like, oh my God, this is like how we manage our business. This is planet, and this is people, and this is customers, and this is community. I was like, all right, this is great. Oh, it's just for American organizations. And so I kind of just watched it. And bizarrely for me, super curious person, I did not reach out. And then I heard it arrived in the UK in 2015. So I watched B Corp grow. It's like 2008 onwards or something like that. I can be a bit off with my dates sometimes. It's all a bit of a blur these last 20 years. And then as soon as it came to the UK, I was on it. And that was really it. And it was more to kind of, we had the data from ISO 14001 and the investment people. So we already had two pillars. We're in the UK, so we have benefits that far outweigh many countries in the world going for B Corp that don't have the NHS or pension schemes, so that you get this really big uplift. I come from Cornwall, one of the most impoverished regions when we were in Europe and stuff like that. So we had the social index stats. So, I was working in that region. So that lifted our points up even further. So that was really the journey. And actually, people talk about the journey being rigorous because of the bag of opportunities and the actions I'd already taken. It was actually really easy. And, we scored the first try, 103 points, 23 points, above what was needed. And one of the highest B Corps, I think, in the UK at the time. And the first year cohort, which is like, there's only 70 of us. And so it was amazing. And for me, it doesn't define us. It doesn't create our purpose. It just coalesced a new map to traverse the landscape of being in business. And that was it. It was a brilliant tool for that.
Matt, absolutely fantastic and beautifully described. I think there'll be other B Corpers out there that will just listen to that and just think, what a brilliant introduction. Let's move on though. We've hit over 3 minutes now. I knew we were going to do this, but hopefully you're okay to carry on. I'm sure our listeners
I'm easy. I got nothing
with the conversation so far. I'm keen for it.
You're just going to have to cut it down a lot.
No. We're leaving it all in. It's all good gold. But Matt, you've described it beautifully, and you've described what it meant to you as an organization, and why it was such an attraction. We're gonna play a slight devil's advocate, I know, with the next part of the conversation, which I know is a core thing for you in terms of that sort of real radical transparency, I think, is the term that we use, and openness to just discuss and debate these things. Would you mind providing our listeners, therefore, with just a brief summary of I think it was Elizabeth Bennett on the BBC site. Would you mind just providing a little bit of a summary of the article that she wrote in February 2020?
And I mean,
whatever the most interesting pieces were for you in the piece.
Yeah, so just like really succinctly, because there's lots of really good, rich questioning, and I think the biggest thing with this article, which was B Corp certification, turned into corporate greenwashing, and actually I hosted an event at Blue Earth Summit 2 years ago where one of our speakers did is B Corp just greenwash with an intranet, and we had a really great live conversation with people from B Lab's board, with B Corps and people wanting to be B Corp. So one of the things is, I think we have to have these uncomfortable conversations, and it's not that everything's going to align with us. But with Elizabeth's article, it's kind of raising concerns around the certification, and I guess you're going like, how responsible is it when we're seeing multi-billion-pound organisations get certified, and we've got organisations that, where do you see it being really a business for good if maybe they could be producing more sugar or more waste or more transport? So where do we draw the line? And also what was being brought out alongside the large corporations. So, if you've got organizations like Nespresso and then we've got small producers like Cafe Direct, what is the difference between these organizations? If we just see the certifications to be, just like we see the certification of fair trade, what is that distinguishing difference? So and then lots of controversies that surround those organizations. And then, of course, this opens up like, what is B Corp about? What is its integrity? What is its own accountability? And also that maybe B Corp doesn't always, reflect the company's commitment to social and environmental responsibility in its true light. And then if we use the term greenwashing as well, you've got the anti-greenwash charter. Where does that leave us? So hopefully there's a little succinct thing. It challenges maybe the role of the big corporations, the movement. What have we got? 10,000 plus B Corps globally now, 2,500 plus in the UK. London, the B Corp capital of the world. So where is B Corp going? And I guess in its simplest terms, can we trust it?
And Matt, just looking back, I think it's really interesting, as you've alluded to, like one of the first B Corps here in the UK, the first B Corp in the UK was
first B Corp design agency. There were plenty of B Corps like Cook Food and TYF, Bates Wells, and organisations like that that were before us. There's 15 that helped bring it to life.
I'm with you. I recall James Perry, who at Cook, being one of the founders in the UK. But as somebody who's been there from the start here in the UK, what's your report card for B Corp over that period? What would your synopsis be of the strengths and the weaknesses and the opportunities for growth and development looking forward?
Great question. And I'm probably an awkward one to have there, because going back to what I said earlier about my sense of duty and responsibility, I'm both a rule breaker and a rule follower when it suits me. The rules of B Corp and the way I read it, I really adhere to. Mm-hmm. However, that's me and my interpretation of when I signed the Declaration of Interdependence, what it is to move the dial on our businesses. You know, we were already good, but could we be better? Do we need to be better? What is sustainable business? Because we could keep trying to be better as well and then break our business. I think in the early days, it was quite a lot of small activist businesses. Mm-hmm. I think at one point, 38% of the community were SME to micro. Okay. And it was actually getting in these bigger organizations, and they came up with like methodologies and training platforms and all stuff to kind of increase to get these bigger organizations. All I can say from my perspective is where I do hear the rumblings from some of the smaller businesses not agreeing with these large corporations coming in, were we thinking, maybe not quite the answer to your question, but going back to the USP, unique selling point, were we using B Corp as a USP? And if that's the case, then that's not what B Corp was about. You know, looking at B Corp is for a systemic change. It will take time, but it's really looking at the role of capitalism, yet it's still caught within capitalism. And with anything that scales is gonna have its own sort of problem. But for me, it's worked brilliantly for me and the way we use it. But then that goes back to how I was when I did the job at Eden and how I was doing my career beforehand. I've got a certain way of doing things. I'm still willing to challenge. B Corp doesn't define my business. Yes, it opened up a ton of new projects and relationships that I never expected. I've got friendships with some of the leading CEOs in the UK, which I never expected from a small agency in Cornwall. And I mean, I'm talking friendships, not even clients and business. Mm-hmm. It opened doors like I never believed. And actually, my version of system change was originally, it was like, how can we design for change as a design agency? But what's the biggest and greatest way we can make change? So that, going back to the report card, I'd change that report card to a passport to helping others see that there is something they can do. Going back to, what you said about the students, what advice would you give? Going back to now using that same advice to students to B Corp, it's an access all areas thing, and it's down to you as the individual in the business about your integrity, your accountability, your conscience, and all of those aspects to be what is it to be good in business. And so that's kind of more where I would be looking at. And then that leads into the spirit, or for me, the spirit of B Corp and the intent of its original founders to be a better way of being in business. And B Corp's original line was, people using business as a force for good. It was people. It wasn't business as a force for good. Mm-hmm. That's just been the shortened, version. Just like Gandhi never said, "Be the change you want to see in the world." That was paraphrased from like a page of writing. And so I still adhere to people like you and me using our businesses as force for good. And what does that mean then when we're looking at that? Rather than, hey, we're a B Corp and we've now got license to make lots more stuff. I'm not sure if I've answered your question at all.
Matt, you provided like a really interesting commentary, and I'm sorry I slightly put you on the spot with that one.
No, it's fine. My mind went off.
Well, no, but it's fascinating, and somebody who's I think it's so refreshing again to have such an open conversation with somebody that's been there from the start and obviously has had such value from it, as you alluded to in terms of the work that you've done, but is also able to see like, as the organizer or as the entity has developed and grown, there are challenges at play. What do you... The large organization thing is really interesting. And I think we actually had a Responsible Edge not long ago where one of the magic wand suggestions from a guest was that I think they were suggesting, and obviously it's in a magical world, so that hence the suggestion that was made. But he was suggesting that he wants to see, there to be no large corporations. That inherently large corporations are fundamentally unsustainable in many ways, and that ultimately by ensuring that there's a cap on the size of an entity, there would be perhaps positive outcomes from that. Do you think when it comes to B Corp and you look at like its growth and development next, do you think it will right itself in terms of some of the controversies that it's recently had working with larger organizations? Do you think it can be applicable at the very large corporate level?
Yes and no. I think, again, B Corp's adaptive. And so it's learning on a global level. And we've got a complex world, and not all countries have a different way of being in business themselves. And so it's easy to pull apart anything, isn't it? In reality, any organization who puts their head above the parapet will be, into a place of massive scrutiny and usually attacked. And actually, I applaud B Corp and the founders, Jay and everybody, for putting this into the world. And I do think it's for me, the B Corp framework, and that's the gold for me. It's not the certification. It's a free framework. We're not even paying for it. And we can understand our business more holistically, making it more sustainable, making that we can do all these interventions before we get into a problem, that we can be more fit for the times ahead of us. So more future fit and looking at our business long term in the short term. But going back to your question, as things grow, things got to adapt. So in the early days of B Corp, you had to recertify every 2 years. I don't know if you know that. Mm-hmm. So sooner had you finished the B Corp EIA, and that you would then you'd literally be back into the next cycle. So lucky for everybody after year 1 and 2 cohorts, you get 3 years rather than 2. In that time, B Corp's always highly adaptive. So it's getting global feedback. It's doing the best it can to really listen to its community and external community. And it's got a standards board that really looks at everything. And to become a B Corp, people go, why is it so rigorous? Why is it so hard? Why do I have to do this? You go, really, do you want this to be that easy? Even the big businesses, however they got through, the big global corporates, they would have done a monumental level of work to get through. Whereas they're like huge tankers, Leap's like a little surfboard. It's really easy. We're a service design company. I feel embarrassed with our high scoring points. I really do, because it's too easy for us. And that's why we've seen such vast growth in the service industries in the UK. And also, if we want systemic change, it's no one left behind. So there's going to be businesses that go extinct because they're just not fit for purpose for the future generations. But B Corp, as I said, is helping prepare not for a defined future, but just getting the exercise of how to be better in business. And it's not equal. And yes, you could say just a name like Nespresso versus a small coffee producer in Cornwall. How can they even be in the same space? Whatever Nespresso or Brewdog did at the time, obviously we know Brewdog and others have handed back their B Corp certification. Nespresso hasn't. That there is scrutiny. So once even these businesses that are big, that put their head above the parapet and go, we are this, they are going to be attacked and lambasted, and actually may have to hand back things. Maybe the independent standards committee that verifies these larger businesses, because it's not one person, it is in the US, a standards committee, maybe they will go, actually, no, we were wrong. And then they will adjust their course. We were seeing that for the first time in over a decade. So I've gone through 3 different iterations of the BIA. And everybody says it's harder and more rigorous. Trust me, it's easier now because the system lets the flow of your scoring way better than when I couldn't go back and forth in the system in the first time. It's like one draft and do it. So the new standards that are coming in, will they work? Will they don't? Unknown. It's going to be a minimum standard. The competitive scoring, the gamification is coming out of it. Now, in the early days, the gamification was lovely to create a new normal, like getting people on board. Hey, I get it. I got to get 80 points and above. Average business in the UK, 55 points. And I've worked with so many organizations helping them with their B Corp journey, including charities that can never become a B Corp that now use the B Corp BIA to just make themselves better in business. So what will happen in the future with these new standards, this new minimum? I don't know, but I love that it's evolving. I love that it's challenging itself. And I think it's necessary to have this scrutiny. And we all have choice, but once we didn't have anything to help support our businesses in a more holistic way forward, now we've got one of many maps. Just like once we didn't know what the world was like. Is it round? Is it flat? And I mean, some strange people still think it's flat. But we have various different maps of the world and people used to explore from it. So it's just one map to help us explore. It's not the defined map. We need to stay curious.
Matt, I love that. I think that's such a strong and well-conceived analogy. And I think, again, a real commonality that's come out of a number of conversations that I've had recently on the show has been around this. And I don't know if you appreciate this term in this context, but the use of the term clumsy to refer to broadly a lot of what's going on within the sustainability agenda, and that actually we need to have an appreciation that we are going through a period where we're not going to have everything perfect. It's not perfection. It's progress over perfection, and it truly is. And do we want a world where there was no B Corp? Well, absolutely not. Like look at the enhancements and improvements, and the organizations that, as you quite rightly alluded to, have picked up that map and really run with it and look to evolve the way their entities operate. It's fantastic progress. What we need, as you've alluded to, which is fantastic to hear, is we need B Corp to continually look to evolve and evaluate and listen and learn and adapt. And it's brilliant to hear that that's happening.
Can I just add in something there quickly? But I'd also say, but also new way markers, just like you have signposts on the way about the landscape. So that's when alternative certifications and alliances can make it more robust. So, we've got the Sustainable Creative Charter. It's not a certification, but it's just about, being bold, challenging how we design, challenge brief. We've got what you do with the anti-greenwash charter. Again, that's kind of, they all add layers into B Corp, and actually they feed into it. And again, B Corp does not define us. And, the UN Global Compact has 3 times more membership than B Corp, but we don't hear so much about that. And then you've got Race to Net Zero, you've got the Good Business Charter, you've got the business squares. There's so many things, and we could end up doing all of them and never doing any work as well. But it's choosing what works for us, and it all ultimately comes down to us and what is our integrity and what is our spirit of being in business for ourselves and future generations. I think that's the simplest thing.
Matt, that was beautifully summarized, and a great mention of B Corp not being the be all and end all when it comes to alignment of what our businesses mean and what we're trying to achieve in the world. And I couldn't agree with you more. And certainly the work that we're doing at the Charter, we're working with a number of B Corps now. And I think it's great to see the appreciation and understanding of alignment of various different initiatives and how they can all fit together. Matt, we've done 50 minutes, though, already, which is flashed by in a moment. But let me conclude by asking you the magic wand question. I am incredibly intrigued as to hear what we're going to do with the magic wand. But Matt, if I was to hand you a magic wand and you could change one thing about the commercial world this instant, what would that one thing be?
I had to think about this. And, your mind goes into loads of things, but I would love a movement that came from my magic wand of Enoughism. And it's kind of like what we were talking about earlier, like you said about capping the size of business. It seems improbable because of the nature of business, but any ecosystem we know in the natural world can only grow so large before it doesn't work, and kind of either has to break into new systems, or what happens when the water dries up. So we had a greater understanding of what enough was as we fit into our global business ecosystem within the planet's ecosystem, and that Enoughism became a huge natural part of the way we think. And in that case, it's like knowing that what is enough to live the life we please, that suits everyone, so more equitable. So in Cornwall, how could we have a more equitable region where everyone, the ceiling, the floor and the ceiling was raised, so that we aren't on the lowest, of the impoverishment index in Europe, and that there's a better quality of life for all rather than just a few. So they were balancing out on a global level. And maybe that could come from a global carbon credit system where people all had a set base income, no matter where you're in the world, because you had a set level of carbon credits you could use. I'm not saying carbon's the only way to inform life, but yeah, a way that is everyone enjoys the world equally with enough.
Well, Matt, you've got me backing Matt Hocking for global world CEO. That was a sensational Magic Wand suggestion. And enoughism is a beautiful turn of phrase. And again, it's a common theme that keeps coming up more and more on the show. And it's really interesting to hear that these kind of themes are coming through, from various different places and being shared. But I love the term enoughism. Matt, it's been an absolute joy having you on the show, as expected. I hope you've enjoyed coming on too, and hopefully we might be able to get you back on for another show at some point. But
I've loved it, Charlie, and thank you. And again, I know my mind meanders, and I hope I haven't taken us down too many journeys, and there's enough fruit there that makes sense for the listener as well. But thank you for inviting me in.
I'm sure our listeners will provide some comments on any fruit-based analogies or any other that they can pull from a brilliant podcast. So
Could I finish with just a quote I wrote just before? I like a good quote, kind of thing. And so my own action in life, it used to be the antidote to despair is action. So I don't feel despair because I'm always in action, but I've changed that now to the antidote is love in action, because I love our planet, I love this life, kind of thing. But I was looking more for somebody famous, and just before I was looking at a stoic kind of look, and I came across Marcus Aurelius where it says to harm the earth is to harm one's humanity. And again, that's just leading back to the connectivity between ourselves and our home planet. And I think we've got work to do in here to reflect how we interact out there.
Matt, you are a podcaster's dream. I think you've just crescendoed with the title, the snippet. It's brilliant, and to manage to.
I didn't even get to see my book list.
Oh well, we've got to get you on for another show. This is too much.
Well, let's do it. Let's do it face to face at some point in the future. And thank you, Charlie, and thank you to both the Responsible Edge and the Anti-Greenwash Charter for reaching out to us as well, and to me. And we've been advocating yourselves to some of our clients. I think our MD's introduced you to hopefully Hope Solutions and a few others if you don't already know them.
Fantastic stuff, indeed. Matt, we'll leave it there for now and carry on the conversation. But thank you for today. It's been brilliant.
Thank you.
And that's it for today's episode of The Responsible Edge. A big thank you to Matt Hocking, founder of Leap and a leading advocate for planet-centered design and sustainability in business, for joining me on today's show. Matt's experience as a B leader brought invaluable insights to our discussion of Elizabeth Bennett's article, As Greenwashing Soars, Some People Are Questioning B Corp Certification. We really drove into the complexities of certifications and their role in driving real impact versus inadvertently enabling greenwashing, which obviously was very interesting from our perspective. As a reminder, this episode was brought to you by the Anti-Greenwash Charter, championing responsible sustainability communications. Visit antigreenwashcharter.com to learn more. I'm Charlie Martin. Thanks for tuning in, and don't forget to subscribe, share, and leave us a review. See you next time.